My name is Dr. Georgine Bess Montgomery. I am honored to be the chair of the Department of English and Modern Languages. We have a few faculty members here. I'm going to ask that they stand. So as chair, I wanted simply to come and say hey, to bring greetings. I am going to turn the program over to our brilliant poet, CAU faculty Deandra Jackson, who will be followed by Dr. Brittany Crowell.
Good morning, good morning. And welcome to the 52nd Laying On of Hands, Healing and Wellbeing in the Africana Experience. Okay, so this first poem is called The Hope of Healing. Okay. Feet like anvils, hair in coils. The brother is stepping. The sisters are moving with the heat of history, fashioning their feet. We dance in rhythm. We sing in unison. Our sleep is disturbed by djembe beats in the dead of night. I call for help in the belly of this ship. I close my eyes and dream of home. I touch my belly round with life. We are singing around a fire. We will vigil home with flowers tender in our wombs, and we will cradle them to stay alive. Our hope for healing is in our seeds. Okay, thank you. And the second piece is called On Purpose. I want to forgive America, to be nimble and unreflective, and escape the rage the antebellum brings. Then I envision the fear in the eyes of those chained in tight spaces, inhaling putrid fragrances, seasick, numbing from racing thoughts of never returning. Then with dropped jaw, I watch men scale Capitol walls and remember how our insurrections ended, heads severed and unblinking on wooden posts. Along the road, a morbid example made, or with feet hopelessly kicking until they can't. I want to forgive America and elude the assimilated shame of mispronounced names, but they pronounce our names as questions on purpose. Thank you.
Good morning. Hope you all are doing well. I'm so happy to see you all here today. My name is Brittany Ray Crowell, and I am one of our wonderful English professors here at Clark Atlanta University. And so before we begin with our speaker that I'm so excited to have here today as a hip-hop head and someone that also uses hip-hop in the curriculum, I wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping in terms of if you haven't registered for the event through Eventbrite. That's just so that we are able to keep track of, how many people have come to the events. There was a link for it, but there's also a QR code. And so I'll have that posted out for you. You'll just put your email and it just allows us to see that you were here. Also, there will be a QR code for those of you that need credit for class at the end of the event so that you stay the whole time. So at the end of the event, there will be a QR code for this particular session. And so for each session and all of the workshops, at the very end, there will be a QR code for you to be able to scan. Okay? All right. Also, if you attended the Poetry Slam yesterday and you didn't get to do the QR code, I have the QR code for that as well. Introducing our speaker, Dr. J.L. Adolph, also known as the XL professor and CEO of Dad Cypher Entertainment, LLC, is a dynamic force in education and fatherhood. With a PhD in English and African diaspora studies and a rebellious approach as an assistant professor of English, he challenges traditional education by infusing hip-hop and narrative therapy into his teachings. Focused on emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, Dr. Adolph inspires clients through authenticity of hip-hop griot traditions. As a fatherhood coach and college to career specialist, he guides educators at Promise Youth, commonly known as at-risk students, and fathers on a journey of healing and empowerment. Through Dad Cypher Edutainment, Dr. Adolph creates a transformative platform where education meets hip-hop culture, reshaping the future of fatherhood and education. Welcome, Dr. J.L. Adolph.
I don't think I'll need a microphone. Can you all hear me? Oh, okay. All right, I need it for him. It's a hand mic. Okay, cool. All right. All right, we'll do. Here we go. A child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. God is calling on you, but he's smiling too, because only God knows what you'll go through. You'll grow up in the ghetto living second rate, and your eyes will sing a song called Deep Hate, Deep Hate, Deep Hate. I am a bastard, the product of low-income teenage parents. My father, a crack dealer, was frequently incarcerated. I grew up in an abusive household with a mentally impaired great aunt and a crack-addicted uncle. I experienced bullying and witnessed atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. Malcontent stories became normalized to the point that they became my lullabies. Like most people who endure adverse childhood experiences, better known as ACEs, I was considered the walking dead. In America, 63.9% of all adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. The CDC reports that 17.3% have experienced 4 or more. Studies show that African American males are the group that are most impacted by ACEs. When we talk about adverse childhood experiences, what it does is impacts an individual's self-esteem, and it adds to negative self-talk. This negative self-talk can come into the form of an inner critic, and that inner critic can lead many people to high-risk behaviors, mental health issues, and it could lead them into just facing all kinds of issues where they are feeling low self-esteem that can lead to damaging behaviors. Many people are shocked that inner critic often sounds like me and you, your mama and your cousins too. And why is this the case? Because many of those, what we find is these traumas are passed down like heirlooms. See, the power of life and death is in the tongue. And many of these stories that lower our self-esteem and lower who we are as in terms of adverse childhood experiences are passed down through family stories. When we talk about family stories, the stories that we first learn about ourselves come from our loved ones. And these loved ones are the people who are supposed to love us the most. They are the ones that, in a sense, shape our identity. They are the ones that we look to tell us who we are, where we're going, and that sort of thing. But many of our family members are unhealed. And what will happen is that what happens is many of them will bring stories with them that carry generational trauma or generational curses. Many of them carry with them stories that talk about sexism, racism, trauma, and that sort of thing. However, we do not have to fall victim to those stories. We can use the power of the pen to change the narratives that's been written about us. Before hip-hop therapeutic writing, I was definitely victimized by my family's stories. The stories that they taught me about myself, for the most part, made me feel like I was worthless. So when we talk about, when family members would say to me that their lives would have been better had I not been born, I believed them. When they said that I was stupid and I would never amount to anything, I believed them. They taught me to hate, and then I learned to hate myself. They wrote their scripts on my heart. But in the words of Goody Mob, hip-hop peeped in my window and pow, she changed me. Her words were medicinal. Her words were therapeutic. And like the rapper Common in the song I Used to Love Her, hip-hop for me became my priestess. So when I think about it, her words transform me. And now I stand before you a survivor. Now some of you may say, hip-hop, how, Sway? When we talk about hip-hop, because isn't hip-hop the same music that promotes misogyny? Isn't hip-hop the same music that promotes violence? Yes, it does. But at its core, for marginalized communities of color, hip-hop has stories that relate to trauma that impacts adverse childhood experiences. As for me, hip-hop helped me to rewrite my narrative and remix my mind. Allow me to break it down for you. Just like hip-hop samples will use a sample and that sort of thing and break that down, in the same way, we can go back to our narratives that our family told us in the past, and we can take all of those stories and we can flip it. I call this the EDR method. So, when we talk about the EDR method, it is a 3-step program. So here we go. The first, the E represents externalization. So, when we're talking about a person, a survivor of adverse childhood experience, the first step that they need to do towards healing is to go to a place of isolation. They must be free from distractions. And in that space, what they are expected to do is take the pen and write from a position of power. And why are they writing from a position of power? It's because they are no longer victims. Just like a hip-hop artist will take on an alter ego, adverse childhood experience survivors must adopt a different mindset. And when they adopt a different mindset, what they're doing is taking the narratives that have been written about them and transferring it to the page so that they can take power over them. We control our demons when we take them out of our mental space or our spiritual space and write them down on paper. Because in the paper form, what we can do is ball it up or even burn them if we want. Just don't do it in your home. Now, with that being said, many people may have insecurities when it comes to academic writing. They were like, hey, I don't want to write my story down on paper and that sort of thing. Well, it's important to know that when you engage in hip hop therapeutic writing, it's not about writing academically at all. It's not even about writing with perfection. Because when we write and we seek perfection, it's all about adding on. When you are going through adverse childhood experiences, it's important that you strip away like a sculptor. Because what you're doing is taking away all the negative that has been written about you so that you can find out who you are and what your true form is. Next, the D in the EDR method represents deconstruction. Just like an old school hip hop DJ, we must dig into our mental crates to find out where our loops come from. In other words, we must go back to all the childhood stories that caused us pain. And when we go back into those, well, think about it just like this. Just like Kendrick Lamar has the hit song Luther, right? In the hit song Luther, he includes a sample from the great Luther Vandross, If This World Were Mine. Now imagine if we go back to those childhood stories and we find out the secrets behind these stories. Better yet, what if we take this a step further and start looking at and start questioning, where did this story come from? Whose voice is this? Does it still serve me? These are the things that we have to look back. Because when we go back to the origins of our stories, what we can do is actually find the value of what we can do. When we look back at those stories, we can look at it and say, okay, well, what part of our family stories add value to our lives? But those parts that do not add value to us, guess what? We can destroy them. You do not have to become a slave to what your family has written about you. As a matter of fact, I expect you as future MCs to be able to unleash your battle rapper. What I want you to do is take the pen and destroy your opponents in the same way that Kendrick did Drake. Sorry, ain't Drake fans. Here we go. All right. So with that being said, now that the E and the D are complete, I'm not going to lie, when you're going through the hip hop therapeutic writing process, when you complete externalization and deconstruction, many people are going to feel depleted. And why is that? You have unearthed part of your identity. And this was a deep part of your identity. But I want you to remember this. The stories that were written about you were not necessarily written for you. And what happened to you as a child is not your fault. As a matter of fact, it would be powerful. What I expect you to do is, even though it was not your fault, I would like you to take responsibility to pen the life that you want to have. What I call this is a rite of passage, meaning that you can write and start going into the life that you want to become. Begin with a manifesto. When I say a manifesto, it can be written in prose, it can be written in poetry, it can be written in hip hop song. Whatever form you write, it does not matter. The only thing that matters is this, is that you write as a healed and write as a person who is who you expect and want to be. Now, with that being said, now this bastard no longer sings a song of deep hate. Because of hip hop therapeutic writing, as a matter of fact, I don't call myself a bastard at all, because I have embodied the spirit of Anansi, the spider god of stories. And at my university, at Georgia State University, I empower students to become weavers of their own story. As a matter of fact, They are starving hip hop artists like Eminem. They are losing themselves in the moment in their story. With that being said, as my hip hop testimony concludes, if you can't remember all the verses I spit in this moment, I want you to at least remember this. What happened to you during your childhood was not your fault. The stories that were written about you was by unhealed authors. But they do not get to finish your book. Through hip-hop therapeutic writing, the EDR method, you have the power to externalize, deconstruct, and rewrite your narrative. I'll say let's start it now. Okay, what I want you guys to do in the audience, I want you to close your eyes for a moment and think of your hip hop name. Think of your hip hop name, all right? I'm gonna say you are MC such and such over there, okay? Next, I want you to reflect on any negative childhood narrative that has been written about you. And I want you to release that. So let's take a deep breath. Now, finally, we're about to rewrite your narrative in this moment. In the words of Kendrick Lamar, I want you to repeat after me. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. Your identity, your narrative at this moment in your mind has been remixed. Thank you. And I'm about to go into some discussion. By the way, my name is Dr. J.L. Adolph. I'm happy to be here. How y'all doing? All right. Okay, so let's get into a little discussion here. Okay, so for those who don't know, I'm going to give you a little bit of why I use hip-hop therapeutic writing. And what we have to understand is this. The reason why I use hip-hop for the most part is that hip-hop is a culture. And for those who are not hip-hop historians, it's important to understand that hip-hop was born and bred out of the Bronx. So in the Bronx, we're talking about in 1973, a brother by the name of Kool Herc, and he was actually given an opportunity to, actually hip-hop was a back-to-school project for many students to have a space to release. What was going on in this particular time period? So what was going on in this time period was, it was an era of deindustrialization. You had urban decay, you had poverty, crack, and hip-hop, for the most part, functioned as a voice for the voiceless. And it was the social media of its time period. It used elements of art like graffiti, MCing, DJing, dance, and knowledge. So when we talk about hip hop, it is not just what you hear on the radio. When we talk about hip hop, we're talking about an entire culture. So what is hip hop therapeutic writing? So I gave you the rundown of it, but it used multidisciplinary writing strategies to incorporate different forms of therapy. I don't know if we have any therapy majors, psychology majors, but it includes music therapy, poetry therapy, narrative therapy, therapy to increase educators, parents, and students' social emotional learning. So this is the function of hip-hop therapeutic writing. Hip-hop, like most music, is therapeutic. So I'm going to give you a little bit of rundown so you can understand where this comes from. When I talk about hip-hop therapeutic writing, it goes all the way back to a professor from Fordham University by the name of Dr. Edgar Tyson. He is the one credited for using hip-hop in his interventions with young people. What he found is that it helped him to become vulnerable enough to share their stories. And so when we're talking about trying to empower students, and we're trying to talk about uplifting and breaking through emotional walls, it's important that we understand that education should be a holistic experience. It's not just learning how to write a thesis statement. It's not just learning how to write the structure. It's really about how do we articulate ourselves? How do we find our true, authentic voice? And many of us as educators have to understand, and I believe many of the professors that's here at this university know that we can't reach our students until we reach who they are as human beings. So that's the reason why I use this approach. So when I talk about hip hop, for the most part, I use a lot of what hip hop therapeutic writing does. It borrows a lot from narrative therapy. And why narrative therapy? Because we learn the world that we live in through the stories that we tell. We learn that. Like through the stories that we tell, we learn our stories, we learn who we are based on 3 different factors. Now, when I gave my presentation at the beginning, I talked about family. That's the first one. But we also are shaped by our community, and we're also shaped by the media. So we have all of these different spheres of influence telling us who we are. But through the power of hip hop, we can use the power of our own story. And when I say the power of hip hop, make no mistake about it, it did not just begin in 1973. We're talking about the African griot tradition of poet historicism that carried on through the Middle Passage to now. And so these are the spaces that through the power of story and music and word that we can heal and begin to understand. Because many of us in marginalized communities may not have access to therapy for the most part, or may not even have a trust in therapy. And so hip hop therapeutic writing functions as a liaison to connect us to that mental health service. So, for a quick moment, I'm going to basically direct this part of the conversation to the CAU professors and educators here, and how you can use this in your classroom. So for one, when we talk about hip hop therapeutic writing, one of the values that hip hop therapeutic writing offers is it is a silo breaker. Sometimes we have the English department, the psychology department, and all these different departments. But guess what? Our students are learning from all of these different areas. So with hip hop therapeutic writing, it's a silo breaker because we can use hip hop therapeutic writing to talk about things from a social standpoint, from a therapeutic standpoint. We could talk about race, class, and gender. So all of these different elements of hip hop, we can use this to kind of bring a cohesive or in a holistic way of teaching and addressing students. One of the things that I use when I teach my English courses is I use hip hop therapeutic writing as a journaling experience. As a matter of fact, I sometimes use the lyrics of Juice WRLD or J. Cole or Kendrick Lamar, or sometimes even, what's the kid from Chicago? My students, what's the Chicago MC that everybody loves? No, he has Slime Therapy, the song. NBA Youngboy. Yeah. What's wrong with y'all? I know y'all stuff. Get out of here. So, NBA Youngboy, I even use that. I use what he says in his lyrics as journaling to help students to understand and open up about themselves. So I would say, as professors, we don't necessarily have to like all the lyrics, but we're using this as a way to get students to open up to the writing experience, and also to open up to finding their truth. In addition to that, I use positive intelligence tests and 16 personality tests to figure out what type of ways I should present stories to help students. So this is why it's beneficial. Last but not least, I use hip hop to address beef and conflict, sometimes with students. Sometimes we'll sit down, we'll have talk. I was like, let's use our words, and we'll discuss, because sometimes we'll have some disagreements with our students from time to time. So, that sort of thing. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is the last part I want to get to. So, let's talk about the MC influence in storytelling. Okay, here we go. One of the ways that I think hip-hop therapeutic writing is most impactful for students is because one of the main goals that you guys have when you finish at the university is to try to gain employment, correct? Like you want, or how many want to, show of hands for those who want to be employed after you finish? Okay, so that's good, that's good. How many of you want to become entrepreneurs? Okay, because that's important too, that we talk about entrepreneurship as well. But I'm going to give you an example of how hip hop can help you with both areas. So as mentioned before, I use hip hop for college to career, but let me show you how the story, how we can use hip hop as a way to help you to get employed. It is called the dip theory. So I want you to realize I am not Lisa Nichols, but I'm going to use Lisa Nichols' storytelling technique called the dip theory, and I'm going to use that to show you guys how you can become employed. So, when you are writing, so students, you can take notes here. When you are writing, or when you are applying for a job, it's important that you begin at the beginning of the dip, which is this. You talk about your biggest achievement. What did you do at Clark Atlanta University? And so here is how you could begin your writing. You could say, what most people know about me is that I'm still blown away that I have been able to achieve blank. When people look at me, what they see is a person who is blank. So when you begin this dip theory and you're applying for a job, you begin explaining when they ask a question that every student stumbles with, tell me about yourself, you begin with your biggest achievement. Now, the second part is you go into your dip. And in that dip, you have to be vulnerable enough to share your darkest moment. And you're not just sharing your darkest moment for the purpose of sharing your darkest moment. You could say, this is one of the things that I experienced, or the biggest challenge I had to overcome was blank. The reason why you're doing this is because when you are talking to that employer on the other side, you have to be able to be relatable. The one thing that all employees and also your customers will understand in the future is struggle. So if you are comfortable or become comfortable with sharing your story of struggle, then you can help them relate. And when you relate to people, they begin to like you, and that can lead to employment. So with that being said, here is one of the languages that I use, but what you may not know about me is blank. Last but not least, we do not end with the dark side because that would be totally depressing, right? So you would come back up, and because of this lesson, I am committed to doing blank. Let me break this down for you and show you how it works. So I'll do it just like this, and then I'll open up the floor for questions. So let's say I'm going in for a job talk and that sort of thing. Here is what I would say. Well, I would say my name is Dr. J.L. Adolph, a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And also, I graduated from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and I have a PhD in blank, blank, and blank. However, the biggest challenge that I faced was the fact that I did not have autonomy and control over my voice. I grew up in an environment that was very negative for the most part. I had teenage parents. I struggled. And in that, I was constantly force-fed messages that were said that I was less than. But at that breaking point, I began to listen to the words of KRS-One and Chuck D. And they really taught me how I was in connection and harmony with all of greats that came before me, the Malcolm X's, the Langston Hughes, and that sort of thing. And it's through this journey, coming out of my dip now, it is through this journey that I've decided to devote myself to helping other students who may feel like they're voiceless. I have devoted myself to that opportunity to help them to step into their light and step into their purpose. You see how that dip works? Find your dip and use that to make yourself relatable to your clientele and to make yourself relatable to your future employers and that sort of thing. And with that being said, I hope that you were empowered in this moment, and I would just like to open up the floor for questions because I feel lonely up here. So let's begin. So with that being said, any questions about any part of my talk? Okay. All righty. Yes.
My question for you, and thank you for giving us the framework.
Okay.
I am someone who is really torn about Western therapy because of the way in which it tells Black people that their responses are an issue, but we're responding to very real things. So I think this is such a useful framework. But my question for you is, what is one of the most transformative rap songs or hip-hop albums or artists that really helped you contextualize your framework as something useful?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I would say this. I would probably, now you got to understand, I'm really, really old school. I'll go all the way back. So, but I would say for my generation, I'm Generation X, one of the greatest generations. But anyway, but I would say this. I would say it was an album that was transformative for me. And I would say the album that was transformative for me was 1991 KRS-One Edutainment. And here's why. Because I grew up in the inner city projects, and many of the school systems really kind of taught us obedience, and they didn't really teach us about like learning yourself, leadership, how to empower your voice. And when I heard KRS-One, this man was able to talk about Christianity, Islam, and still was able to talk about, you know, African history and all of that. And he was able to teach powerful lessons in 4 minutes and some seconds, better in many cases than many of my supposedly trained teachers who were not members of my community. And so I felt empowered in that moment to do that. I would say there's still artists today. I would say a really transformative album was actually when I listened to Kendrick, Mr. Morale. That is like a very powerful album that really dives deep into the world of therapy. I mean, in that, he was talking about family, he was talking about masculinity, he talked about the COVID pandemic, all of those. I really love concept albums that really dive into the human experience. So I would say, but it's plenty of artists, Logic, J. Cole, and it's still new up and coming artists, JID. These are some people that I really like and listen to. And even the quote unquote thug MCs like NBA Youngboy and that sort of thing. You'll be surprised, they will have a song or two that's introspective that really challenge that. Even though maybe they promote a lot of misogyny and violence, but they'll still have an introspective song. So yes, I'll open up the floor for any other questions. Yes, sir. Okay. Hey, that's a good question. I would say this. I don't see hip hop in and of itself as a culture being able to solve all the systemic issues. When I look at hip hop, in many cases, I see it as an extension of the Black arts movement. And when we look at the Black arts movement, this was a time of, Amiri Baraki, Nikki Giovanni, all of these poets and that sort of thing. But the music and the poetry was the soundtrack to real political movement on the ground. So what I see is that hip hop can function as the artistic form of expression, and you can use it to weaponize in many ways, like the Black arts movement, but it has to be in conjunction with grassroots movement. So I would say in and of itself, it cannot, but if it's in tandem with grassroots movement and that sort of thing, I believe that will make the force legal. So yeah, but that very good question. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, first of all, this is really great. This is my background.
Okay. Yeah.
Author. And I also asked, do you think that rappers who don't, like, I heard this conversation, open communication, that, like, rappers stray away from talking about those subjects, could diminishes the extension of hip-hop, or the personal extension of hip-hop, like sharing that story, and talking about that story, and you think other people come into the picture and take from it, like K-pop, or, when white people come in, so that you think that hip-hop is going downhill, taking from telling black stories and focusing on, just being rich and other topics of the spirit.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say that this is best. So I got to meet one of my heroes, Chuck D from Public Enemy. So some young people may be like, who is Chuck D? Flavor Flav, most people know him. He was the guy who actually was the medicine, and Flavor Flav was like the juice when it comes to that. But to answer your question, Chuck D best explained it to me like this. He said, in every culture and every music, there has been what's considered high art and low art. And he said, you need the balance of them both. He was like, if everything was just like political and always telling stories, then you'll miss some of the spontaneity and fun that's a part of hip hop culture. But he said, but everything can't be low art because you need something to elevate the consciousness. What I would say is the difference, what I see that's an issue in what we see in mainstream is that we are limited to one type of hip hop. So I'm from St. Louis and that sort of thing. So yeah, we have Sexy Red. Sorry guys. But I would say this, Sexy Red still offers something in the sense of she offers a bit of ratchet and fun and that sort of thing. And some people like having ratchet and fun, but yet at the same time, you need that balance. What I would say, the major change that I would like to see in hip hop would probably be hip hop going back to its original roots where it was a buffet of different styles. So when I was growing up, we had like your Boogie Down Productions, and you had your KRS-Ones, but you also had your NWAs, and you had your Tupacs, and that sort of thing. And what was so cool about it, and then in the middle was a Tribe Called Quest. And so what you could really do that was really dope is all of these guys would go on in concert together because they knew that hip hop needed to, what made hip hop special is all the varieties of different stories that it had. I think now the industry, for the most part, wants to limit us to one specific message. But we control what we consume. So yeah, I would just challenge everyone. Don't just go with what you're streaming. Go and look up your local artists. If you're looking for someone like Toni Morrison said this, she was like, she began writing books because the stories that she wanted wasn't, being written. I would say look up artists that if you are looking for a specific story in your life, go to ChatGPT and that sort of thing and look up hip hop artists that are telling that story. It's out there. We just have to be we have to do a little more searching, and that's part is sad. But hopefully that answered your question. So let me see, making sure. Okay, still got 4 minutes left before the next presentation. Yes.
Okay, so you were saying how traumas are passed down and everyone is modified but I have two questions about it. So do you think that's an intentional thing or kind of at this point like a traditional thing? And what are steps that we do for that continuous and
Yeah, I would say, well, it's definitely, I would say, unfortunately, it has become a tradition in some respects, but from a psychological standpoint, now, I'm an English major, I'm not a psychologist, but I will say this, from what I've read, it's called intergenerational trauma. And that means that the traumas that one generation experienced is often passed down to the next generation. So, for example, even if you go outside the African American community, for instance, if you go to the Jewish community, and you will find that Holocaust victims sometimes pass down the traumas to the next generation that did not experience, and that sort of thing. And so I believe a lot of this is passed down from one generation to the next. When we talk about the Middle Passage and we talk about the antebellum and the slavery experience, it's a great book out there called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and that by Dr. Joy DeGroy, exactly. When we think about it, after the experience of slavery, we did not have therapy. So in many of those cases, some of the traditions that we pass down, we still carry that. For example, I'll give you a real quick example. My mom used to always give me this speech before I go into the store. And she was like, hey, before you go into the store, don't you ask for nothing, don't you reach for nothing, don't you even look at nothing, don't breathe on anything. Whatever you do, don't do it. Why? Because she understood that when you are a person of color, you are always under surveillance. And could you imagine going shopping at Walmart or any place, and you imagine everyone think you're a thief? It'll change your shopping experience. You're like, hey, you looking at me, that sort of thing. So those things get passed down from one generation to the next. But how do we get over that? I think for the most part, we have to not be afraid to isolate ourselves only for a moment and start really beginning to write who we want to be as a healed person. Because sometimes the stories that our families pass down to us can limit our growth. I'll give you a primary example. I grew up in the inner city projects. We couldn't stare at people in St. Louis. So when people would give us eye contact, it was like, you want to fight. So for the most part, I carried that even to job interviews. I did not look at people eye to eye because I'm like, if I stare at you eyeball to eyeball, I have to throw hands and that sort of thing. Well, this was before I started wearing these jackets and stuff. But that being said, I wasn't always this way. But I had to learn how to transform that story because part of that is I was like, I can look you eyeball to eyeball because I am just as much as a human being as you are. And so, but I had to go through that painful experience and start saying, what are the parts that my family gave me that are good, and what parts are limiting me and holding me back? Do not be afraid to write your own chapters in your life. Your family may even say, you change. Guess what? You're supposed to change. If you go back, sometimes I go back to St. Louis, the same guys that I went to high school with are still the same guys holding down the corner. And you're talking about these are men in their 40s and 50s. That looks ridiculous holding down the corner at 40 and 50. But many of these people were afraid to change their narrative. They were afraid, oh, what if somebody will think I'm different? You're supposed to grow and evolve. So I would say one of the steps, the beginning step, is taking that pen and pad and starting to write, what is it that I want to be? Imagine who you would be as a healed person. And I will begin with that. Yes, ma'am.
That is my area, and I talk about transgenerational trauma, we also need to talk about transgenerational resilience, because that's how it's here.
Yeah.
And so we have to remember that when we talk about those experiences. And then the other thing is that it's not only that we have those experiences in our generation, it's that we are continuing to experience cultural violence in our society. And so it's on top of that, in addition to the everyday human kind of things that happen in terms of our relationships, our jobs, our school, our this, that COVID, Trump, hey, it's like, in addition to all of the human things that are happening, there is the day-to-day cultural violence that's occurring on top of the intergenerational. So even if you didn't have particular personal trauma, the transgenerational trauma is still going to impact you and will limit the way you do things. And the writing is therapeutic, as you're saying, and it is that writing, whether it was verbal stories or whether it was written stories, it is the telling of those stories that breaks us through and being able to do that. So the writing, in some sense, or at least culturally, even though we may be talking about ourselves and bring ourselves, it still needs to be collective.
Right.
So I'm going through my journey in order for us to be free.
Yeah. The me is we. The me equals we. Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with that. And, I talked about one side of it, but certainly when we talk about those stories, some of the stories are resilience. And a lot of, and that's why I said in part of my little talk at the beginning part is take the parts of our stories that add value and hold on to those. But in a sense, what I'm asking students and everyone to do is kind of embody the spirit of Sankofa, which is really go back and fetch it. And when you go back and fetch it, you'll see the Sankofa bird and he has this little egg. But imagine this, that egg may have fallen on the ground and it may have some contaminants and that sort of thing. So when they say go back and fetch it, they're not talking about the contaminants. They're talking about the nourishment in that egg. So what I would say is go back and fetch the part of your family narratives that add resilience, that add black boy and black girl joy, and that sort of thing. Hold on to those. However, the parts that limit your growth, that cause strife, that may be a story that's not yours anymore, make sure you discard those, because you have to begin to evolve and write your own story. So yeah, that's what I would say. Okay, and it's 10:55, it's my time, and I know we have another presentation. So this young lady is coming up. She will tell you where to go. This, young professor here will tell you where to go.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for being here. Our next session is at 11 o'clock. It is in Carl and Mary Ware, 309. Thank you so much for being here. There is a QR code if you need to sign in, if you have not already signed in with your professor. You can also check in with me if you registered on Eventbrite. But thank you so much for being here. We will see you at the rest of our events. I'm Professor C. When you see me, say what's up, okay? And y'all take care. We'll see you at the next event.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So do we leave this here? Or?
Yes.
Okay.